This is the liquefying enzyme. We're just getting ready to add the corn into the mash batch, and we're going to add a split dose, 1/2 of the Termamil SC enzyme, so that the corn doesn't thicken up. All right. So we're going to pour in the Termamil SC, keep this stuff from clumping up. Now this is always fun. Pick the right end. If I drop my glasses in there, I will really regret it. I don't know how farmers do this in the freezing cold, out in the middle of a field somewhere. I mean, you have to pick out exactly the right thread and then follow it. Sometimes it gets stuck. When that happens, you're better off with the knife. When it happens, it's a beautiful thing. That boiler decided to build up a little bit too much pressure, so it's just a safety valve went off on it. I shut it down for now. I was trying to bring it up to temperature. You know, this is actually the easy way to do it. I really respect the people that did it in the out in the woods. No electricity, no water, nothing to stir with. Got to get your own fire. Where's the water coming from? Humping sacks of corn up the hill for your starting materials. I mean, it was back-breaking labor, hard, dangerous, and with no amenities. That's why the police didn't treat these people really as criminals. They treated them as people that were just operating a business that wasn't legal, but not like gambling or other. Wasn't considered so much of a sin, I guess because it was so deeply ingrained in American culture that that's what you did with your surplus grain. You made whiskey, and that's what bought oranges at Christmas time, and that's what made things go, but they had nothing. And we used to use malt for our enzyme. We get barley malt, which is specifically grown to have much more enzyme to make sugar than is needed for the malt seed in order to germinate. I mean, that's really what malt is for and why plants have it. Is that the starch in that seed has to be converted to sugar so the plant can start to grow. So every plant has malt enzyme in it to help the seedling along. And that's why in order to make malt, you sprout the seed in order to get that enzyme activated. And then you stop the germination and dry it carefully And that's how people would make corn malt, because they didn't have access to barley malt. And you can use that sprouted corn, which has been carefully dried or is still in the sprouting stage, add it to a larger batch of cornmeal, and it will serve as sufficient enzyme to do some reactions for you to make sugar out of a large batch of corn with a small batch of malt. But barley malt is specifically grown and selected for its ability to have way more alpha amylase, sugar-making enzyme, than is necessary to germinate the plant. And I started out as a malt person, but malt is very difficult to work with. It has much lower tolerances for its pH, and it only operates in a very limited temperature range. And if you don't get it to work in that range, you're stuck. You're not going to be making any sugar. Five. Oh no, not this second. Not right now. All right, let's see if a new razor blade really is the answer. It sure is. Boy, that thing, this stuff dulls razor blades fast. Because that was a new razor blade I was using, and it lasted 10 bags. So after you add the corn, you can check the pH, then you adjust the pH to the optimum for the enzyme, get it up to temperature, and add the enzyme where it's supposed to be. And then we got to get out the hydrometers and the refractometers, and we have to start measuring, whoopsie-daisy, measuring sugar production as we go. Okay, you can see how much the level of the batch has gone up, and the corn isn't clumping too much, and it's pretty thin. I mean, you go down to the bottom and there's corn down there, but it's all, there's one big corn ball floating around in here. You can see him here he comes. Now if you get and we'll come back and put some insulation on that, but for now, just getting the lid on will limit our problems. But I'm going to drop it down to 195 so the pressure doesn't go too high. So that seems to be working fine. We got a 300 stack temperature here. Our combustion chamber is nice and dry. We're not running a real big flame. I'm not over firing the boiler, but all right. If you just come in here and turn the flywheel just a little bit, just anything, it'll probably line up on a place where the teeth will engage. So it's just a minor inconvenience. It's just a part of my life I thought I was done with. Ta-da. because if you start it in cold water, the yeast are really alive. They're dormant, but they're waiting to wake up in their billions. And if you start them in cold water, the cell walls can burst very easily. So like any other organism, a nice warm bath. We're just going to take a scoop of yeast like this and sprinkle it in. I think we'll do 2. And we are going to feed our little beasties. Give them a snack. Something to wake up with. You don't want to wake up and not have anything to eat. We're going to make about just sweet enough so that you can taste the sugar. Because if the yeast is genuinely active, then it's going to start telling us it's awake by making carbon dioxide. Fortunately, that mixer is working great. Boy, not having to worry about mixing. This is going swimmingly, really. I mean, this is a minor load of difficulties. This is easy to deal with. So I think we're about done for a while, till I get to 185 degrees, I can't do anything. And what was I, 119? And it's 10:30. So 1 degree a minute is going to be 60 minutes, say 60 to 90 minutes. I'm going to talk about the fact that we've got the temperature of the tank up to 194 degrees. Just go ahead and add it. I checked the sugar, and the sugar was 7% sugar, but those aren't fermentable sugars that are showing up on the refractometer. What we're going to do is we're going to take this paddle. Now that blade's whipping around pretty good, so if you get this paddle caught in that blade, you let go and just let the paddle snap. But about an hour ago, I couldn't get this paddle down to the bottom on the outside. And the corn was all balled up on the side, and you couldn't feel the bottom. And I fought it for a little while, and what I did was I cranked up the speed and really put the whirl action to it to try to abrade that stuff off the sides of the tank. And be patient, just be patient. Let the enzyme do its thing. And now, when I put this paddle down here, I feel that there's movement all the way at the bottom. There's a little bit of sludge down there. There's a little bit of this. But you put the paddle very easily all the way to the bottom. And you just do this in a little corner, and it'll tend to travel and erode the corn all the way around. Well, now that's not entirely true, because there's a nice big ball of corn there. We want to get that off the side, and you try not to have to fight the corn, but you always end up having to fight it and clean out the sides. There. And that's why we go through this cooking process. We got to get all that corn loose, and by the time that enzyme has done its work, it will just be like a soup, like a homogeneous soup. And that's when you know the corn is cooked. And this is where the junctions are, where the cables come in. Yep, you can feel there's corn up against that wall. George, I think we've got it. I'm going to come back over to your side one more time. Then we can get a sample of this. We'll take the pH. We'll check the sugar. And then we'll see if we want to add a little more liquefying enzyme or whether it's time to cool this down. All right, we'll just let that temperature hold there for just a little while we get the pH. All right, so gotta get the solids out. Boy, that is really good thick corn mash. I mean, it's been liquefied, but it hasn't had its sugar made, okay? We're just trying to find out the pH of it, really. So we'll let that strain through there. And you can see our yeast has come a long way in the last several hours. It's gotten nice and frothy and foamy and clearly is very active and healthy. And you can just come over here and give it a little stir. There might be a little stuff on the bottom. All right. And let's see if we got enough fluid. Boy, we didn't get a whole hell of a lot of fluid. But, and we're going to soak that in cold water, because you can't really measure the pH. The instrument won't behave properly. The thermal activity of the molecules is going to make it behave as if it's more acidic if it's a high temperature. So we brought it out at 195. We'll soak it in cold water and we'll get it down to about 120 degrees, and pH meter will work in that range, and so will the test strips. This is soon. I mean, I started at 9 and this is 1:30. I'm an hour ahead of schedule, even with... All right, now we're getting ready to chill. What we're going to do is we're going to shut off all the boiler inputs. And I don't use glycol in the boiler. I only have street water. So, because what you're going to do is shut off this return. There's 40 pounds of pressure in here right at the moment, because that's what that boiler's running at. And you're going to shut off the delivery. So that takes care of this boiler. This circuit, this big coil is now isolated between these two garden hoses, and we're going to run cold city water through it and out there, and that's going to serve as our chiller. I've got another chiller over there that's for the still. It will run another time. The last thing we want to do is we want to try to get an idea about the temperature differential between the top and the bottom of the tank. And fortunately, I've been fighting this all day. I mean, up until about an hour ago, I could put my hand on here and it was about 115, 125 degrees at the top, at the most. Although the top was getting close to 180, it was still, there was a 60-degree temperature differential between the top and the bottom. And now I see that it's 191 at the top. This is the first time this thing's worked all day, really. And this is 183 at the bottom. 183, 191. So 8 degrees temperature differential between the top and the bottom of the tank. That's pretty good. And the bottom of the tank is above the operating temperature of the enzyme, so you know you're safe. This enzyme will operate at well above 180. And they're all shining and gleaming, and everything's all buffed up. And you notice mine still has a blanket on it. And that's because I don't have the boiler capacity to spare for all this radiation area here. So I just put a little blanket around my still, and that saves me a lot of BTUs. And then when I'm ready to cool, boy, you open that up and the heat just pours right off it, and you're cooling. We'd like to see that pH down around 5.5. So the hydrometer and the refractometer rarely really agree with one another, but in this case 23% is great sugar. Let me see if I can get a better read on this. Oh, there's a nice bright line. It says 25. All right, so where were we? Now we're back to pH. But I do want to reduce the pH a little bit because the second enzyme that I'm going to use requires an even lower pH. And now it wants an optimum of pH of 4.1, and we're at 6. So we'd have to go down 2. I don't want to go that far because I don't want my batch to start very acid. A lot of people use sour mash, and I'm not a big fan of sour mash. It's just too acidic. But it will operate from 5.5 to 3.5, and we're at 6.0. So I want to reduce the pH of this by at least 1/2 of a pH number. And to do that, I'm going to add 4 cups, which is 1 liter of distilled vinegar. You can use phosphoric acid. You can use sulfuric acid. Do not, under any circumstances, use battery acid. So this is 4 cups at a pH of 6. We're just going to pour it in and chill down. And see how much that moves it. And we'll have another chance to add another 4 cups here in a little while.